Okay.
Good morning, everybody. Again, sorry for the slight delay in getting this meeting started. So we're going to start the Finance Committee meeting this morning. I'm going to share my screen, but first I do want to welcome the student advisor reps to the Finance Committee meeting. So welcome, and please don't be shy to ask any questions after presentations happen, okay? So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Give me 1 second. Okay, can everybody see that? Yes?
We have it. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, and to the board committee members, I also shared this presentation with you guys last evening as well, so you guys should all have copies. But just want to go through the 2 agenda items that we have today. We're going to do a financial overview, including some state and federal updates regarding the 25-26 calendar fiscal year. And then it is actually that time again, the 26-27 budget timeline overview. So we're going to get kicked off into the next year's budget this October 16th. So 1 second, there we go. And I'm going to actually hand this over to Dr. Yannicone, and she's going to walk us through both the state and the federal updates.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome, Ella and Alessandra. It's nice to see you. I'll start with the state budget update. As you likely know, members of the board, as of this week, the Pennsylvania budget is 100 plus days overdue. Typically, we receive that budget by June 30th of 2025. And while we have on occasion had a delay, it has been a while since we've had this significant delay in receiving state monies. There are several key issues contributing to this impasse, and I'll actually be at a meeting later today with the county superintendents, hearing from our representative to get some more information about where they are with regard to resolving this state budget impasse. But mass transit funding is certainly one component causing concerns and debate and continued challenge for the members in Harrisburg. The proposed budget increase, they have not been able to arrive at a dollar figure that makes sense to everyone. And the revenue proposal is also a problem. And so Kara could certainly share more specific details, but we want to provide a general overview of where that state budget impasse is. With regard to the impact, the funding delays are resulting in our statewide organizations using reserves, including us, as we need to, obtaining loans. We have not had to do that to this point for operational purposes, and some districts are even looking at service and staffing cuts. And we are very thankful in that because we have a business office department who are working really hard to ensure that we can utilize existing reserves. And you know, we have a solid fund balance, which Kara will get into in more detail in a little bit. We have been in good shape, and we feel very confident that we're able to continue to function well, and certainly we are in much stronger solid situation than many of our neighbors. We're grateful for that. In addition to that, at the federal level, as you know, the US government shut down, and that does mean that services and funding have halted. Now, I will say there are funds being held at the state level that will come to us from the federal government once the state budget is resolved. But currently, the federal funds are not being sent to the districts because a requirement is that the state budget must pass before federal dollars will flow through. So right now we're looking at approximately 20% of the funds that the district counts on between state and federal dollars that are not passing through to the district. Key issue contributing to that shutdown is that the Congress has not yet been able to agree on full year funding legislation or a continuing resolution to temporarily extend that funding. There's been conversations about a possible CR or continuing resolution into November, but to date, we're not seeing any movement in that area. The impact of that is that we have a halt or a slowdown of non-essential government services. And there have been some significant federal staffing cuts, both that have occurred and additional cuts that are being threatened. So there's an uncertainty around the federal funding allocations. There's also been some concern around some of our government services. I do want to share that Title I reading services, despite the fact that we have not received those funds, continue to be fully provided to our students at the elementary school. And all special education services are in effect and will continue. And so those are two areas where we've seen some fairly significant concern in the community. And I want to assure both the board and the public that we intend to continue to provide those essential services. In addition to that, we are providing full meal service to all students and families, whether or not children are qualified for free lunch. They are receiving their lunch as they should, because we consider that an essential service. And we'll do everything we can to make sure that our families are getting what they need in those crucial areas. I did see a hand up. Mr. Jordan, did you have a question?
I did have a question, but I think you answered it. My question was more so along the lines of with the impending funding issues or allocation of funds, would there be any point in time within the school year that we would have to consider reducing or eliminating services? But I think you answered that question, so I think we're good. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's our intention to work together, Ms. Green and I, with all of you and the other members of the board to ensure that essential services continue for our students. That may mean making some other decisions around perhaps use of fund balance or borrowing. There is also an option that school districts are being provided to take a loan from the state government that then would be offset once they resolve their budget. And I'll let Ms. Green talk about that more specifically, but there are choices we can make as a district to ensure that our students are receiving essential services, that our staff remains intact, because in part we have very healthy investment strategies, and you've been a part of that. And then we also have a very healthy fund balance. So we feel we have some flexibility that some of our neighbors do not have. Mr. Bedard?
We're probably going to get into the actual numbers here. So if that's okay, if you want to push this to when we get to those slides, Ms. Green, but I'm looking to better understand the two different risks on the federal side. So there's a tranche of funds that sits with the state from the federal government that we'll get once the state passes the budget. And then it sounds like there's a separate area of risk associated with the shutdown and the cuts to the Department of Education. And do we have like an estimate on those two? Do we know how many federal funds are sitting with the state so that we can plan accordingly?
It is my understanding that the title funds were fully funded coming into this school year. And my understanding on the way those works is those get allocated to the state, and those monies have been allocated to the state because of it's kind of a twofer right now, because the state has not passed their budget. Those funds are being held because no funding is being released until the state budget is passed. So if the state budget had been passed, we would be receiving federal funding, and the federal government shutdown wouldn't impact that piece of it. The piece that Dr. Yannicone touched upon that I think would have an impact is the National School and Breakfast Lunch Program. That is the majority of that program is federally funded. And we received information that the federal government that program was funded through September. And so because of the shutdown at the government right now, at the federal level, that would be the one program that we would have to get more information on or see how that's impacted as this continues. But all of the title funding that is filtered through the state, those funds have been released to the state and are sitting at the state for distribution when the budget gets passed.
Okay, and each of those line items is in our budget, right? So we know the dollars associated with the title funds
Yes.
based on the traditional allocation or the regulatory allocation, and those are not at risk. It sounds like the biggest concern is the lunch program, breakfast lunch program.
Correct. And if you recall, when we did budget, when we did our budget presentation, I go super conservative when it comes to the federal and state. At the time of budget, we were hearing from all different sources that there was going to be an elimination of Title II and Title IV and a reduction of Title I. So if you recall, I did not budget fully for Title I. I eliminated Title II and Title IV completely, so our budget does not rely on receiving those funds. We then found out after the fact that that funding was being fully restored. So the anticipation is that we are receiving that. But if for some reason something happens when we pass the budget, we had taken that assumption into the assumptions that were happening with our revenue budget at the federal level.
All right, I appreciate your conservatism.
Yeah.
Helpful.
Thank you. So the impact to the district, and you really touched on this in those two most recent questions, Mr. Jordan and Mr. Bedard, is the impact of these, the budget impasse at the state level and the federal shutdown on us specifically. So you can see there the delays in state subsidies and reimbursements and the pass-through funding, as we've already discussed, and the national school breakfast and lunch reimbursements. So what we're waiting on right now is approximately $3 million in state and federal pass-through funding that's currently being withheld from the district that we are hopeful we will receive at some point this year. In addition, as I mentioned previously, Ms. Green has worked really hard to manage the district's investment strategies, cash reserves, and we have a fantastic community who pay their property taxes early or on time. And that high collection rate has a tremendously positive impact on our ability to absorb this financial impact. So we're very grateful to the community, for meeting that expectation and even exceeding it, because we have a number of community members who pay early. They take that benefit of paying a little early in August, which helps us to plan and continue to absorb this impact. So as of July 1st, our fund balance for the general fund was about $20.5 million. And we also have that as an existing resource. And Ms. Green, I think I'll turn it back over to you at this point.
Okay. As we transition into this, I wanted to give a snapshot because we're talking about a lot of numbers. We're talking about the financial health of the district. So I wanted to put together a little financial overview, the current state of affairs in the Springfield Township School District. So we have an understanding that when we're saying that we're okay to absorb and that our fund balance is healthy and investment pieces are strong, that you actually put numbers to paper that backs up those statements. So I just wanted to show what our approved budget was. You'll see the revenue expenses with anticipated use of fund balance, a little under $1 million. That was approved in June. Where we are year to date, we're about almost $48 million of revenues have been collected or realized. That's about 64% of our revenue budget. That is normal, and that outside of the state money not coming in, we're trending on a almost flat line or slightly below where revenue collections are, only because of the state budget. All of the other funding sources are coming through at the local level. And again, our discount period for taxes ended I think it was September 2nd, and that is when we get the majority of our property tax funds. Those collection maintained to be about 98%. So we are still realizing the cash flow that we need to supplement our reserves in order to be able to absorb the fact that the state budget has not been passed and funding has been delayed. At the expenditure level, we are at about 17% or about $13 million spent. Why this looks so skewed is you have to remember that our teacher's contract is a 10-month contract, so they don't start getting paid until September. Our fiscal year starts July 1. So when you're looking at the difference between where we're spending in our budget and where revenues, that this will catch up at some point because revenue collection will slow down because we get our money pretty much up front in our fiscal year. And then as the year continues, our budgeted expenses get expended. So just an answer on why that number looks so skewed. And then again, a repeat of where we are with our fund balance as of July 1. I also wanted to put in here a per pupil expenditure cost, just so that you understand what this number is and how much it costs to educate a student within our district. October 1st is when we have to submit to the state through PIMS our enrollment data. So I verified that with Trish Carney, who is our PIMS staff member. So our enrollment at October 1st was 2,455 students. And then there is a calculation based on PDE, and it's from the Every Student Succeeds Act. It's the ESSA. There's guidelines where we have to report items by building level. And that's going to get even more granular with our 24-25 annual financial report that we have to submit by November 30th to the state, because they are requiring us to break down every cost in the district by building. So we have to allocate by building. And then what that does is there's a calculation that happens that then tells how much it actually costs to educate a student. Things that are excluded. Some people, this is a conversation that people have all the time and business managers have to speak to, because what people will do is they will take our budget, they'll take the expenditure budget of 75.7 million, and they'll divide it by our enrollment and say that is how much it costs to educate a student in the district. The reason that you cannot do that, or that that number is overinflated, is because there's certain things that the state has you back out. One is debt service. So when you back out the debt service number, that brings that number down. The other things that you back out is you're backing out all tuition payments. So if a student is placed, that tuition, cyber and brick and mortar charter schools, you back out those things. So there's a list of items that you have to back out from that $75.8 million expenditure number, and then you can divide your total enrollment to come to the per pupil expenditure. Does that make sense to everybody?
That does make sense. I had a couple
Yeah.
questions, but I think you actually covered all of them. I guess the one question I would have is, and I understand you may not have this data available, but how are we in line with most districts in our area, or is that even, something that we track?
That's information that I can get you. That's not something I track on a monthly basis, but I can most definitely take a look at neighboring districts, or the Montgomery County districts to see where we fall within that.
And then I recall seeing different figures. Are there other calculations for this that we've used in other places? Or am I remembering numbers that are completely different?
So it might be confused with our tuition rate, because the board approves a tuition rate every year, but that tuition rate is determined by PDE, and the question comes up all the time. It's the rate that we would charge a student if the student was not a resident, that if they came in. And that happens every year. I think it happens in May or June. That information comes out from PDE. It's a calculation that they go through and they provide us. So that might be the number that you're thinking of, which is different from the per pupil expenditure.
So there's even more excluded from that number.
Yes.
Okay. All right, great. Thanks.
No problem. Okay, and so I wanted to revisit this slide. This committee is very familiar with this slide because we do this during our budget presentations, and we talk through this. I just wanted to revisit this because I think it's important to see the historical piece of where our budget versus our audited actual year-to-date numbers are, because it's very important to understand the difference of fund balance. And then we're going to get into the next slide, and you'll see that with when the audit comes out, because we have our audit presentation next meeting. When you're looking at different pieces of the audit, there's something called our net position, not to be confused with fund balance. And so I think this gives a good snapshot of where our fund balance lives and the historical piece of it, and how our budget, our final budget and our actual year to date has impacted either positively or negatively fund balance. And again, we have the big asterisks on the last audited year, because that was the special losses for Carson Valley. And we discussed that in multiple finance committee meetings and our 2023-24 audit presentation. So we see that that number is skewed from the historical piece of fund balance use. And that was a one-time hit that elevated that number. And so, again, I wanted to get into the audited financial statements
Ms.
a
Green,
little
I'm
bit.
sorry.
Yep, go
Sorry
ahead.
to interrupt. I didn't unmute myself, but going back to that Carson Valley, is that completely off? Like there's no chance we're going to collect for that, or is there still?
I think the chances wane as time goes on with it. We're always making collective efforts to try to see if there's any way that we can recoup. But I think especially now with the state of funding, as you know, there was a big school district that contributed a lot to the loss. With where their financial status is right now, I would not see that as a priority of them of having to pay us back for these pieces of the Carson Valley piece, as opposed to being able to stay financially afloat on the operation level in the state that we're in right now, with the state budget not being passed and the uncertainty at the federal level. But it is always something that we discuss in the finance office. It's not, we haven't let it go. We continue, like right now, there's no avenues through PDE because they're at a deadlock with the state budget, but we revisit those conversations. But as time goes on, I just don't think, I think that that is something that is a special loss. But again, with our due diligence, we will always try to see if there's any avenues where we can go back and collect.
And then you mentioned it, the other district, the large contributor to that. Like, does that remain on their books? I'm granted they don't have the money for it, but does it remain on their books as something that they owe, or do they not even recognize it as that part of it?
I would, without knowing the way their financials are recorded, but my gander is that they would not recognize it, because that was the back and forth between the amount that we were keeping on our books is because of underpayments made because of their theory of paperwork being put in or not put in, or if a student was a special ed student or a regular student.
Okay, so there's disagreement there, which,
Yes.
okay, gotcha. All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, so back to the audited financial statements. I just put in a little blurb about why we have an independent audited financial statement, and what governing board kind of dictates our auditor, and what standards they use when they come in to audit us. But again, I wanted to talk about the difference between net position and fund balance and really touch upon that, because they're two different things, and it can be a little bit confusing. So fund balance represents the accumulation of operating surpluses and deficits. So what that means is every year we have a revenue budget and an expenditure budget. And after everything is audited, we are either going to have, we either spent more than our revenues brought in, or we had more revenues than we spent. So if that was the case, that's a surplus. If we spend more than the revenues that we have, that is a deficit. That on an annual basis, that number, the difference between your revenues and your expenditures, can either decrease or increase your overall fund balance. Does that make sense? So it's an accumulation of your surpluses and deficits on a year-to-year basis to date. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, and it's an asset and it's cash, it's our reserves. Net position is basically taking all of our liabilities, our assets, not in a snapshot of an annual basis, but it is our capital assets, it's our debt, it is long-term debt, long-term accounts payables, it's lease schedules, it is, there have been 2 GASB pronouncements that, in the last 10 years that we've been required to report, other, other benefits for employees. So we have an actuarial study done that reports out how much the district's liability is for health insurance based upon our CBAs, our bargaining agreements. There's also a big one, and this impacted every school district the same way. The one GASB pronouncement that required us to do an actuarial validation on how much our PSERS, which is our state retirement, liability was. And this all came in light of the fact that there was the PSERS crisis, so to speak, that there was a big unfunded liability at PSERS. I want to be very, very clear that the unfunded liability that PSERS holds is PSERS unfunded liability. It is not the school districts. PSERS is responsible to pay out pension. The districts are responsible on an annual basis based on the certified rate that PSERS certifies at the end of each year to pay the employer's share to contribute to PSERS for their employees. So the unfunded liability that we hear and we talk about with PSERS, that sits with PSERS. That does not sit with the district. The GASB pronouncement that got put out, it shows our liability for PSERS for our employees. Many business administrators were against this being put on our books because what it did for everybody is it took our net position from a positive to a negative. And it, in a sense, we said it overstated the fact that we were in a deficit because that liability is not ours, it is PSERS. Does that make sense to everybody?
It does make sense. I think you've explained it well, but both for the recording here and for my own benefit, can you talk a little bit more about who oversees PSERS? So when you say PSERS has this liability, holds this liability, and we'll have to figure it out, is that ultimately rolling up into the state government? And who oversees that?
So PSERS they have their independent board. So it's the state retirement system. So it's the Pennsylvania State Retirement System. It is not the school district of Springfield Township. So all 500 or 501 school districts, they are a part of the PSERS system. When employees from the district retire, your pension comes from PSERS. The way that school districts are connected is that there is an amount, a percentage of salary that employers have to pay to contribute to the state retirement system organization to fund retirements. And that's when you'll hear me say the PSERS certification last year it was 34%. The state does reimburse the district's half, so we pay about 17% into our employees' retirement benefits. And so one of the things, like I said, that there was a back and forth, but the GASB pronouncement came out, and basically what it did was part of it was showing bond investors. It was making government organizations financial statements be apples to apples with for-profits, so that when bond investors look at our financials, it reads the same way. But again, everybody, let me not say everybody is aware. In the financial world of school business operations, business administrators know that the district is not on the hook for $87 million to pay into PSERS. We are required and we satisfy our requirement each year when we pay the contributed amount that we are required to as certified by PSERS each year. However, for financial statements, the GASB pronouncement makes us put it on. So there was a valuation done. And so what I wanted to do is show you that there's a consistency, that there is not this large spike, that from year to year, we go from a 20 million, and that's why I wanted to explain the fund balance, because that is different than our net position. So if you look at last year's audit numbers, our pension liability was 87.1 million, which largely contributed to our net deficit of 51 million. If you take the Peasers liability out, we're at a positive, we're at a surplus. So it largely contributes to that. In 22-23, you'll see the pension liability was 86 million and some change. So it went up about $1 million, which you would expect because there was an increase in Peasers from over year, and then you're dealing with salary increases, so that does impact our Peasers piece. And then you'll see our total net position deficit was 50.4 million. So again, that went up a little bit less than 900,000, a little less than $1 million. So I don't want it to be confused that we were at a $20 million fund balance and now we're at a $50 million deficit. That is not the case. They're two different numbers that impact the different district different ways. The major number that is the one that we would need to be concerned about is our fund balance. That's the main one. That is our reserves. That contributes to our financial health. That contributes to us being able to absorb delayed funding through the state and the federal governments, which is we are experiencing right now. And that is the number that holds more weight on an annual basis than the net deficit, because it is impacted by a number that we can't control, nor are we responsible for.
Yeah, I want to maybe follow-up question to hammer that point home. So there is a unfunded Peasers liability.
Correct.
And we need to reflect that number on our books. However, there's not a world where a taxpayer in Springfield Township will be asked by the school district of Springfield Township to solve that problem.
Correct.
There could be someone else in Harrisburg that asks, but it's not going to be the school district of Springfield Township.
That is correct.
Okay, great. So if bear with me here. I'm going to translate this to like, I'm Jeff Bedard. I live in Springfield Township. Maybe my spouse and I make a salary every year, and we also have a bunch of expenses. That's our operating budget. That's the same as the operating budget that the school has. Revenue comes in, expenditures go out. And at the end of the year, we have a savings account where hopefully there's a little bit of surplus. Some years, maybe they're not. But if we had to reflect our mortgage and anticipated trade school, college expenses that might happen years out, it might look like our net position is not good because we have these. But if college or trade school or secondary school was covered by a grandparent, then even though we're reflecting that it looks bad, there's not going to be a liability that falls on our family. Is that a good analogy?
That is an excellent analogy, yes.
Okay. So what we need to worry about is our savings account every year. Is there a little bit more money in there for cushion or not? And you're saying that our fund balance is our little savings account here. And when it's not little, it's $20.5 million.
Correct.
So we're in pretty good shape.
We are.
Okay.
So, Ms. Green, I don't mean to beat this point to death, but
No, please do. It's fine.
Yeah. So I think we all know there's misinformation circulating in our community, and I kind of want to call it out specifically. I understand, according to this misinformation, that the district is bankrupt. It sounds like you're saying that that's not the case. Is that correct?
That is absolutely not the case. If the district was in financial strain, number one, the terminology is not bankrupt. That we don't use bankruptcy in public school systems. What would happen is if we were in that bankruptcy type of dire straits, the state would come in and take us over, similar to what is happening in Chester Upland, or has been happening for years in Chester Upland. It also happened in Duquesne on the western side of the state. We are not close to being at that level with anything, not with sitting on a $20 million fund balance when our expenditure budget is 70 million and some change. we have a financial strength and we're in a good position. Part of the information that got relayed, and this is why this is important to understand the difference between fund balance and net position, is where the bankruptcy piece kind of came to light, is that the $20 million was said we ended here 1 year. That was 22, 23. And then in 23, 24, now we're $50 million in a deficit. So we're taking fund balance and then we're using the net deficit. And that is where the big swing is coming in a year. That swing would be impossible to have because it is even bigger than what our budget is. That means that all the reporting that we do, when the financial audit was reported, there would have been warning signs way before this. I will call it Mr. Jordan. He asked me a question last board meeting about the snapshots of the financials from last year to this year about our tax revenue coming in, because there was a big gap in between that, which was asked and answered because it was just timing of when our discount period ended and when things were put on our books. But those types of things would be flags. And if we went through that type of a swing in 1 year, you would all see that in the audit. You would see it in the state reporting. You would see it there. Dr. Yannicone would be notified by the government, by the state, because in our reporting, they would see such a dramatic swing that there would be a red flag there. So that did not happen. We are financially solid. We continue to monitor our budget. We continue to make good decisions, fall within the lines of what we report to the board. Every year when we present the budget, we talk about tax increases. We talk about use of fund balance. We are trying to reduce our need to use fund balance for budget, but we also don't close the door on that. You'll see that we're using under $1 million to make our budget happen in order to continue the great programs and offer the resources to all of our students. So again, there would be moments and opportunities if we swung that far and that heavy, that there's no way the board, Dr. Yannicone, the community would not know that something was happening within our district. I will also tell you that we would not be able to be doing a $30+ million middle school project if we were in that type of financial situation.
Great. So, and so while I do trust everything that you say, because you clearly know what you're talking about, beyond that, we don't have to trust it because it's also audited by an outside group. Is that correct?
That is independent auditing firm, yes.
Okay. And so basically this misinformation that keeps coming back up over and over again from the same person is either a complete misunderstanding by this person or an intentional manipulation, but we don't know which one. Okay.
I will let you stand on that statement.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
One last question and point on an outside perspective on the financial strength.
Sure.
Right. You mentioned the middle school project. In order to do the middle school project, we borrowed money. In order to borrow money, we had a credit rating that said what rates we could borrow that money or issue bond against. Can you remind us what our credit rating is as a school district?
It's A+, which is it's the top tier. It's in the top tier of ratings, which means that it's a very strong bond rating. And school districts that are not in good financial health would not have a AA- bond rating.
Right. And so when we issue those bonds, right, like investors who are giving us the money, right, they see that we're highly credit rated and know that we're going to be able to pay that money back, or that they will get a return on that bond that they've purchased. Yes.
Yes, and an independent rating agency, it's Standard & Poor's is who we use. Every year I have to go through, they take our financials. I go through an intensive call to talk about the state of the district on a financial level. They look at all types of financial information that goes and gets presented in front of a committee and a panel of people, again, independent from the district, and then they are the ones that deliver the report and deliver the rating. So it's based off of our financials. which are certified by independent auditing firms. We have a new firm this year, so that, I don't anticipate that the audit will be any different or things will be any different than it was in the past years. There has not been anything substantial that has happened on our finances, the way that it has been spoken about, that would cause any concern or anything would happen that way. They are actually testing right now. We've been uploading everything. So they're actually in the remote phase of our audit. They will be in here the next 2 weeks for internal testing, and on-site testing. If there was a $80 million swing or a $50 million swing or a $10 million swing, there would have been conversations with Dr. Yannicone by our auditors already, because that would have been a flag of a change in how things have progressed, even before I got here to the district.
All right, that was worthwhile. Thank you for that
All right.
discussion.
Any other questions? Everybody okay with this? Okay. So we're going to move on to the 26-27 budget timeline overview. This is it's painless, as opposed to the first look budget when we go through a lot of numbers. So I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Yannicone to talk about our guiding principles which shape our budget.
Okay, so as you know, our theme this year is where values shape vision. And these are our values. These are our guiding principles. And this will guide our vision in developing next year's budget. So first of all, we have our mission statement: to educate and develop all students as learners and citizens who are high achieving, resilient, and responsible in a changing global community. We do, as an administrative team, keep that mission in mind as we are developing our budget and making decisions about priorities. And then we have these 6 recurring priorities. So these are not terms you haven't seen before. You've seen them every year. We intend to continue to offer a strong academic program that meets the needs of all learners. We want to continue to offer opportunities for enrichment through both our academic programming and our extracurricular activities. And every year we have continued to add extracurricular activities, whether they're clubs or sports. And so we've been really happy to be able to do that. And as you know, in the last few years, we've also added a strings program that continues to grow now at the secondary level. We're going to continue to develop our campus and facilities. Last night before our MPA meeting, I was able to walk on the middle school track, which is a fantastic surface, especially at a middle school level. In fact, I think it's one of the few rubberized middle school surfaces in the region. And as you know, and as Kara just mentioned a few minutes ago, we're building a beautiful extension of the middle school building campus, and we'll have a great new performing arts center by this time next year. Technology resources for instruction, for student learning, and for infrastructure. We continue to work really hard to make sure that our students are having quality technology resources, and that includes things like Power School Hub, which we purchased last year and rolled out this year, and all of our middle and high school students this year receiving brand new Chromebooks. And we got fantastic support and feedback from our students in the high school advisory group last week about their new devices. We also continue to offer social emotional resources and supports. As you know, we continue to hire school counselors, social workers, therapists, and reading and math support specialists in order to make sure that our students are getting what they need from a mental health perspective and from an academic perspective. And then we're continuing to provide high quality professional learning opportunities for all staff. And that includes attendance at conferences, whether they are national, local, regional conferences. We've had tremendous support from the board in continuing to send our staff to get better at their jobs. So these will continue to be our guiding principles as we go through the budget process this year. Ms. Green, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Okay, the next slide, this shows our the historical data with our MVPI aid ratio. Again, I'll just remind you, but I think I hammer this over the head a lot so that you guys are well tuned on what this number means. This measures the wealth of our district. So on the one end of the spectrum is 0.1500, which you'll see that we bounced back. We were looking at that 0.1786, and I told you it wasn't anything to worry about. We were still on the side of the spectrum where our measurement of wealth within our district was still high. And it popped back down to 0.1500, which that is the lowest that it can go. Other school districts that are similar to that is Upper Marion, Lower Marion, Wissahickon, Colonial. So that just gives you kind of an idea on the measurement of wealth. On the other side of it, it goes all the way up to 0.729, which tells you that obviously that's the opposite side of being a wealthy district. So we're back at that 0.1500. The certified rate for Act 1 index is 3.50. That trended slightly lower than the projection of 3.70. So you'll see that over the last few years, from 23-24, we were over 4. We are now under 4, and we are at 3.5. So that is the amount, the percentage that the district can legally raise taxes without going to voter referendum or applying for exceptions. There's asterisks on the future projected numbers because they have not released the updated projections. So those numbers are based upon the anticipation that the Act 1 index was going to be 3.7% this year. And the 2030-2031 projection has not been released yet. So as those numbers become available, I will update this slide when we have future presentations. Any questions on this?
Maybe this is I'm just looking for a general answer here, maybe not a technical answer, but obviously the tax increases that we've asked of our community have gone up on a percentage basis over the last number of years that you have outlined here.
Sure.
But they've obviously gone up less than what the Act 1 index has allowed because we've had a philosophy to be under the index to the extent that we can provide that relief to taxpayers.
Sure.
Can you just explain why the Act 1 index would be going up over the last number of years and then projected to go down over the next number of years? Like what drives that, the state giving us the clearance to increase or decrease that percentage?
So if you look, and I have the blurb underneath, but the calculation.
Those are very small letters.
It is, I'm sorry. This is a very intense slide. There's only so much I can add, but it's calculated by averaging the percent increases in Pennsylvania's statewide average weekly wage. So they have that number, and the Federal Employment Cost Index for elementary and secondary schools. So there are two numbers that they grab that get published every year, and that is how it's determined. So however those numbers trend, they impact the calculation on the Act 1 index.
So in the years ahead of us, the assumption is wages for Pennsylvania state workers will increase at a decreasing rate than they have over the last many years.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Helpful. Thank you.
And the other thing that I can say about this too is that I do believe that that COVID had an impact because COVID had an impact on employment. It had an impact on trying to be competitive with employers. So we have seen an uptick in wages. So I do think that that had an impact if you look around that time period between the 22-23 fiscal year and even 24-25, because I tell everybody while COVID happened in the 2021 school year and thereafter, the financial reality of COVID hit after that. It hit 2 years after that. We really didn't start to feel the effects at the business office level of COVID and the economy until after everything was up and running again. And then on top of that, where the economy is right now, the cost of things are higher. So wages go higher because employees are demanding more these days in order to just live. So that does have an impact on it, but those are the projections and those are the two components that create the Act 1 index.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So budget process, this is something of a repeater slide. Just the business office creates the revenue budget. We use historical trend data, economic climate, and then there's some external data that we use from people from the Department of Ed at the state level. Berkheimer, there are local earned income tax collector. So we get information from that, our local tax collector. So we get trends on what tax collection looks like. And then the business office and human resources departments creates the personnel budget. We're responsible for the salary data. I will say, very happy about this. We have, there are no contracts to be negotiated this year, so there are no unknown numbers. That is a very good thing for a business administrator trying to build budget, that I have no numbers for every single employee in the district. So I'm very happy about that. And then human resources provides benefit information. The one thing that I want to highlight is that new staffing requests are reviewed by Dr. Yannicone and by Dr. Johnston. There's a process in place with new staffing requests to make sure that it aligns for the needs of the district and within our financial resources. And then department budgets, we create zero-based budget. What that means is they kind of start from scratch. They kind of have a baseline in their budget, but we don't hamstring them to an allocation because of the climate and the needs in any given year. It's very difficult to tell a special education director that you have this amount of money and you have to stay within this, when there are some unknown variables that we have to be able to maneuver around in different departments. And then the building budgets, they do get an allocation from me. I analyze trending spend over the last 5 years, understanding the needs of what's in the buildings, having conversations with the principals. And we do what's called a needs, wants, and wishes budget. So needs, it identifies the operations in order for you to operate your building or your department, and overall the district. Wants is, we would like to do this to enhance programs, but it is not critical for the program to run. And then wishes is pie in the sky, dream big. And those are usually last to be funded. We make sure that needs are funded first, and then your wants that enhance. And then if we can address wishes, we try to do that. But we like to make sure that people are being innovative. We don't want to stop people from thinking outside the box in order to deliver instruction and to deliver programs within the district. So some of the budget assumptions that are already known, and then there are some that are unknown for me to begin building the budget, is the Act 1 index. The rate was certified at 3.5%. So that tells me my wiggle room when it comes to plugging in tax increases. Again, this is a highlight. All contracts and agreements have been settled. So that is a known number for me to work with. Other contractual obligations are known, like our leases, rentals, our license renewals. We're in the last year of our custodial and security services contract, but that's known. Subservices, we have a really good handle on, and the rates are known there. Utilities and our debt services known. Our unknowns at the state and fed levels are education subsidies. At this point, I will build the revenue budget utilizing 24-25 funding levels. So that's how I'll move forward with that. And then the same thing with the federal levels, the Title I, Title II, and Title IV grants. I will utilize what I put in for the 24-25 funding levels. And then on the benefit side, we're still waiting for our first look for health insurance rates. That usually comes in November, December, and then second look will come out around February or March. And then the PSERS rate gets certified in December. So once I have that information, that's a big, heavy hit on me being able to develop the personnel budget, which accounts for a big portion of our overall budget. Any questions on this slide?
Ms.
Okay.
Before
Yep.
you go away from that slide,
Sure.
for the benefit of our students in particular, I think this is known to the members of the board, but when you look at that, those numbers next to salaries, so I just want to make sure you guys understand that's the increase in the salaries for next year. So it's not the total cost of salaries for each of those groups, it's the increase on the total salaries. So Ms. Green is able to plan for the future based on the fact that we have these contracts settled, because she knows that's how much more it's going to cost us to pay that group. And then the years, so that's like next year is the last year of a 4-year contract with STEA, which is all of our teachers and counselors. And then STESPA is all of our instructional support and bus drivers, food service workers, everybody else who's not a teacher or a counselor. And next year will be the second of a 3-year contract. Act 93 is all of our administrators and our school psychologists. And then the confidentials are many of our administrative assistants in the offices. Okay. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. All right, just looking at budget timeline. So we're having our finance committee meeting today, November 19th. That is a Wednesday. We will be having a finance committee meeting with the anticipation of the 24-25 audit presentation. I will have an update on assumptions or anything that is known for the 26-27 budget discussion. And if there's any updates for where we are currently, I can also provide that. Anticipate at the November 18th regular board meeting, we are looking to approve the accelerated opt-out resolution. We have done this since my tenure here at Springfield. And basically what that certifies is that the school board will not raise taxes above the Act 1 index. So that gives us the baseline of being able to then get to work and making sure that we are presenting a budget that is meeting the needs of the districts, the students, and the community, but also being fiscally responsible by not exceeding the Act 1 index at coming at or below. And then just looking forward, February 26th will be the first look at our budget. And then we will also do our 2026 financial plan. That is the presentation that PFM and Jamie does for our next phase of borrowing for the middle school project. That'll happen in February. And then April 16th will be our proposed final budget presentation to the committee. Dr. Yannicone and I will present the proposed final budget to the board at the April 21st meeting. There is a finance committee meeting scheduled on May 21st. If we have to have any other discussions, if there's anything that possibly could impact the proposed final budget, we can have a discussion then. Typically, the proposed final budget becomes the final budget, but there's always that 30-day window. And then we will approve the final budget at the June 16th meeting. So that's a snapshot of what the budget process and timeline is going to look like. Any questions there?
Just a reminder for everyone, the 30-day window that you just referenced between presentation of final budget and voting on the final budget is a period of time for the public to view the full detail of the proposed budget, ask any questions, bring that to a board meeting, etc.
That is correct. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and that concludes the meeting. So I don't know if there's any comments. I don't know if we have any public members here, but this would be the time for any questions, comments, statements.
Ms. Green, we have one member of the public
Okay.
here watching the meeting. And if that person would like to make a public comment, you're welcome to use the hand raising feature. And then we can recognize you. If not, we'll go to our last slide. I think we're okay.
Okay, and then just what's coming up next. Our next finance committee meeting is Wednesday, November 19th. It'll be virtual at 8 a.m. Anticipated agenda, again, we'll have a state and federal budget update. Hopefully by then we will have a state budget and we can get back to business as normal. It'll be the 24-25 audit presentation and then a planning next year 26-27 budget planning update. So that's the anticipated agenda for our next meeting. And if there are no other comments or questions, we can adjourn the meeting and everybody can get to their day.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation and the explanations.
Well, thank you. And again, welcome to Ella and Alice. Is it Alessandra?
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been great.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. We
Very
appreciate
clear.
your participation. Well, everybody have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, everyone.